Hello and welcome back to Trek Untold, the Star Trek podcast that goes beyond the stars. I'm your host, Matthew Kaplowitz. Now, this week, if you're watching the YouTube version, you might notice something a little bit different about the show, and if you're hearing it, I'm sure you're hearing something different too. So I'm in plain clothes right now, and that's to make a little bit of an announcement here, and that's that Trek Untold is going to go on a little brief vacation just for about probably 4 to 6 weeks to give me a little bit of time off. No, don't worry, the show isn't going anywhere. I'm not quitting, I'm not giving up or anything like that. I'm just literally taking a break, taking a vacation from the show, just for a number of reasons, which I'm going to touch on here in this video. So when I first started the Trek Untold podcast last year, I think back in May, that was basically at the very beginning of the pandemic, and the times were very different, and the whole world was pretty uncertain what was going to happen next and what things were going to be by even the next day. So as morbid as it sounds, it was actually kind of the perfect time for Trek Untold to begin, because so many people who I wanted to talk to for the show were just staying at home doing nothing. So now here we are over a year later, over 60 episodes later in fact, and the pandemic is, well, it's not necessarily coming to a close, but we're definitely getting closer to some kind of idea of what's happening next, and there's a much more feeling of optimism in the world now about it. People are getting vaccinated, and the folks who aren't are going to hopefully get vaccinated too or something. But things are basically getting better, and that's what's really important here. And as the world is getting better, things are changing for a lot of folks. And as a byproduct of that, things are changing for me as well on many different levels. So I kind of want to give myself a little bit of time off from the show just to make some changes, essentially. So regular listeners of Trek Untold know that it is a weekly interview series, and weekly means every single week you're getting a brand new show. And each week, to do this, it requires a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of research, so I just want to kind of give you guys a little bit of an explanation of what my process is, and why that's kind of leading to me needing to take a little bit of a break time also. So, for every guest that you see booked on an episode of the show, there's usually about 20 to 30 more that either didn't get back to me or just said no. So, it's always a bit of a numbers game. And on top of that too, once I get them to actually say yes, and we lock down a date and all that stuff, I then go into my next phase, which is doing research. I don't like to do my interviews cold. I don't like to not know anything about the guests. I like to know as much as possible and watch as much as possible about these guests so I can come to this interview very prepared and give you guys a better show. And also help freshen up the guests' minds, because a lot of times we're talking about shows they haven't even thought about probably in 20, 30 years, if not more. So the more information I can give them, the more they can give back to us. So then there's a researching phase of the show that's usually at minimum 1 full day. Typically it's more like 2 to 3 days. So that's a lot of time just to devote to getting ready for an episode. Once I actually film the episode, that's like way easy in comparison, because that's just basically an hour, hour and a half with the guest, and we're just talking. And then we get to the editing phase of the show, which I also do by myself, because that's what I do. And that part also is pretty time consuming because, now that I'm doing video, it's made things way more complicated. Back when I was just doing the audio version, it was a breeze. It took me some time, but now that I've added video on top of it, we're talking now each episode being at minimum 4 to 6 hours to make, sometimes more depending on how many pieces of B-roll I'm putting in the show or other things I need to tweak. So it's a pretty heavy commitment each week to work on this show. It's a lot of time, a lot of energy, and that's not even counting everything else I do outside of the Trek Untold podcast. As a lot of you folks might already know, I have a YouTube channel which is Nerd News Today, and I'm doing all sorts of videos for that. And even before the pandemic, in fact, I remember this being a video I did quite some time before then, I talked about how I wanted to make changes on my YouTube channel. And that was in 2019. 2020, when the pandemic first began, that just changed everything because I couldn't work on a lot of those ideas that I had, a lot of those concepts I wanted to work on, because I couldn't travel, I couldn't go to places, I couldn't talk to people. It just basically affected a lot of things. And yes, Zoom is one perfect way to fix things, and it works fine for Trek Untold, but there's a lot of stuff I wanted to do that involved being in person and traveling around to do these types of things. So, in addition to that, there's other much more deeper videos, which we're going to get to another time. That's a whole other video. But basically, there's a lot of things I wanted to do, and with those changes happening in the world, I had to still change back and adapt to it also. So that meant me actually upping my output of videos, which I didn't want to do. I actually wanted to pull back a little bit to be working specifically on some other types of things. But basically, my time just got scattered all over the place. I was doing a lot more stuff than I expected I'd be doing, and all the while also trying to find actually paid work as well. So here we are now in August 2021. And like I said at the start of this thing, the world is changing. The world's getting back to whatever our new normal is going to be. And I've decided that I need to take a little bit of a break from Trek Untold because I want to make changes on this show on a number of fronts. The first one being the technical front. I want to make the show sound better. I want to make the show look better, especially for the folks who are watching on YouTube. I'm going to make this look hopefully a little bit of a different type of show now. Still not too crazily different either, but I want to make some changes, just the visuals of how the show is. And same on the audio side, I want to kind of freshen things up in that regard too. And another big part of this too is also just being able to support myself with this podcast. And this is not, again, sour grapes towards anybody here. This is just kind of the reality of podcasting. And, we have a Patreon page, but I haven't gotten a single Patreon. I haven't sold a single piece of merchandise. And I want to tell you guys, I'm not complaining. I'm totally fine with that. But I'd like to find ways to maybe get folks more excited about what we're doing here, because I see plenty of other podcasts who do that type of thing, and they're able to kind of get that kind of community, generate that kind of revenue from things like merch, from Patreon, and I'm wondering what I'm doing wrong that's not really getting folks interested. And I remember actually seeing someone comment on a Delta Flyers podcast post one time. Basically, they were saying how it was so great that the hosts were just getting everybody all excited about their merchandise and all excited about their Patreons. And that's something that's kind of across the board for other YouTube shows and other podcasts I listen to, is they know how to get folks really excited for things like merch and for Patreon. And I don't really do that. It's never been one of my key focuses. I've just been really focused on making good content. That's just what I want to do. And I'm really happy I've got such a great audience listening every single week, because I know you guys are out there, I know you're watching, I know you're listening, and you're enjoying every minute of it. So I'm never expecting anybody to give me a dime for what I'm doing, because it's just been very gratifying. It's been really satisfying. It's probably been one of the most fulfilling things I've ever worked on. I get to spend an hour talking to folks that I'd probably have to wait in line for to spend 30 seconds with at a Comic-Con just to snap a pic. No, instead with Trek Untold, I get to spend quality time with them, and in turn, you get to spend quality time with them as well. So it's been absolutely one of the most gratifying things I've ever done, and one of the most personally fulfilling projects I've ever worked on. And it's definitely showed because folks like you keep coming back every week to support me in that sense of it, and that's great. That's all I could ask for, really, but I definitely want to find ways to make things like that more appealing, because then it also would help me make more shows. If I was able to generate some more money, that might be able to go back into the show for things like hiring more visual effects people, maybe getting an editor, maybe someone to help me out with social media. I haven't quite figured that out because, social media, one of those things I didn't mention yet, but I spend a lot of time each week just doing that. So there's a lot of aspects I want to work on. That's a few of them right there. And again, just to stress that this is not the end of the show, not at all. In fact, when I say I'm taking a month off or wherever it's going to be, I already have about 5 or 6 episodes recorded. I'm just going to hold on to them until I come back from the break. Because, I've got some other things going on in my personal life, and I need the time to focus on those things too. Outside of this podcast, outside of my YouTube channel, there's a whole bunch of things I've been trying to work on for some time, and it's just, there's not enough hours in the day. So I think I really need to take this break to work on those things and just kind of reset myself as well. Because let's be honest here, it's been a rough pandemic for everybody. No one's had it easy. All of us have had our own different struggles during this time period, and I know I've had plenty of them. So I think it's not a bad idea for me to take some time just to work on personal projects, and even just for my own personal mental health, just to kind of rebuild myself, take a breather, and then jump back into things with a fresh perspective and some changes. And I can tell you guys up front that the next batch of guests I have coming up, they're very, very interesting, pretty unique, so you're going to hear some really cool shows once I do come back in. So expect some big things, expect some big changes, and if you're kind of new to Trek Untold, I recommend you go back in time and check out some of our older episodes, because there's a lot pre-video days before we jumped into video around episode 20 with Max Kredenchik, where we had a lot of really great interviews that really haven't had a lot of views or a lot of listens to yet because they're just so old. And I would love it if you guys went back in time and listened to some of those, because they're pretty fun shows. And beyond that, I do just want to say thanks again to everybody who has been listening to the show, who has dropped ratings and reviews on iTunes, who's checked out our show every single week, and spread the word as well, because that's stuff that's super important for making a show like this grow. And really, I can't do this show without you. It might sound like it's some kind of hyperbole or that I'm blowing smoke, but no, it's absolutely true. If there was no audience to support this show would be completely stopped in the water. We would not be moving. We would not be going forward. I would have actually just wrapped the whole thing up, but no, we've been doing so amazing. I can't believe the number of folks who come every week to listen and check out the show. It just blows my mind how many people are into this kind of thing that we're doing. So that's why I want to make it better when I come back. So again, 1,000 thanks and all my gratitude to you for coming back here every week, for listening, because I know you're not coming here for me. I know you're coming for the show. And I'm so thankful that you are listening to all this work that I'm putting in, and that it has paid off in that respect, because there's an audience that clearly wants this and desires this, and I'm happy to fill that void, and also help tell the stories of all these folks who have contributed to the Star Trek universe, whose tales don't normally get heard. So it means a lot for not just me, but for them to know that their voice is being heard, and that's, I think, a pretty powerful thing. So thank you for supporting Trek Untold. Thank you for listening. You never have to give me a dime. It's cool if you do, but you never have to. I'm just glad that you're here every week, checking us out, listening to us, spreading the word, whatever you can do, things like that. Because, as I said, without you, the show does not exist. So to kind of wrap things up here, how long will this break actually be? Well, it's August right now. It's the start of August. I want to give myself at least 4 weeks. Maybe it'll stretch out to 6 weeks. Probably not. But I guarantee probably by mid-September, you will see shows again. And we will be back to weekly. And we're going to see how sustainable it is, too, because as I mentioned, this is a lot of work to do each of these every single week, so there might be more breaks perhaps in between, we're going to see. Really, I guess we can just call this kind of the start of Season 2, if you will, of Trek Untold. So our first season ended with Molly Hagan, and we're going to see very soon who starts up Season 2 of the show. So, again, thank you for sticking around, thank you for checking us out each week, thank you for listening, and I hope that you won't miss us too much during this break, and if you do, there's plenty of old episodes you can always check out again. So stay tuned, Trek Untold will be back very, very soon. When we do, we're coming back full speed, Warp 10. But we're not going to turn to salamanders, don't worry about that. That's been taken care of. So, until next time, I'm Matthew, and remember, fortune favors the bold.